Because some of you are of the mindset that if they're not white, they're okay. And I'm here to tell you that African people have no friends. No one migrates to Canada to struggle with black people. Nobody comes to Canada to be identified with black people. Nobody comes to Canada to live with black people. They come to Canada to replace black people. Toronto, make some noise. Black power, where y'all at? One, two. It's an honor to be back in Toronto after such a long time away. I will do my best not to be around or not to be away as long as I have. My apologies for what happened in June. Took forever to read, and also almost led to me having to cancel my visit to London as well. But that worked itself out, and so here I am. In 1825, a black woman by the name of Mary Ann Shadd was born in Wilmington, Delaware. Her parents would relocate to Ontario, Canada. She was an activist and a black nationalist. Not quite a Pan-Africanist, but she did work with one of the greatest and one of the godfathers of Pan-Africanism, and that would be Major Dr. Martin Robinson Delaney. Martin Delaney was raised in the same city I attended high school, Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. You all can have a seat, family. Unless you are a snow bunny hopper, stand your ass back up. And so, here in Ontario, Canada, Mary Ann Shadd, who once ran a school a few blocks away from where the Frederick Douglass and Marcus Garvey Academy stands, she came here with her family and ran a school for black children in Canada. And not only that, Mary Ann Shadd became the first woman in the history of Canada to publish her own newspaper, the Provincial Freeman, in which she advocated for self-determination along the lines of what the Right Excellent Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey would do a little more than 50 years later. Mary Ann Shadd was an immigrationist. She thought African people should think about relocating to Haiti, Mexico, or other territories in the Western Hemisphere. She became the second black woman in America to publish a newspaper. And even after doing all that, she fought for the equality of African women. Mary Ann Shadd is often ignored in history, but she's one of the greatest black women to have ever lived. And even as an elder at the age of 60, this black woman would enroll in Howard University's law school, and she would earn her law degree, being only the second black woman in America to do so. A great black woman who made her name right here in Canada. There was a black man by the name of Elijah McCoy. His parents escaped from slavery on the Underground Railroad. They ended up in Ontario, Canada, where he was born. He would move back to the States and make his way to Scotland, where he would become a mechanical engineer. After getting back to the States, it was hard for Elijah McCoy to find any work using his credentials due to racism. But he did manage to find a job oiling the parts on engines. And so eventually, he discovered a way for engines to be self-lubricated. Elijah McCoy is the father of the self-lubricating engine. So every time you see an airplane in the sky, every time you get in your automobile, every time you climb on top of your motorcycle, every time you see a lawn mower, every time you see any automotive device or mechanical product that requires regular oiling, remember that it was a black man from Ontario, Canada, who gave the self-lubricating engine to the entire world. I understand that in Canada, a black child is 4 times as likely as a white one to be expelled from school. I understand in Ontario that a black person is 20 times more likely to be murdered by the police than a white person. I understand that although Toronto is a city of 3 million, only about 300,000 of such are African people. But despite being 10% of Toronto, we are 30% of those who are charged for possession of marijuana. And we are more than 40% of those who are pursued for hard drug use. How is it possible to only be 10% and yet be overrepresented 2 and 3 times over in the mass incarceration system? Canada is as racist as the United States.
More. Even more.
And then I read that in Canada, a white teacher is twice as likely to rate a white student as being excellent than a black student who has the same grades. We know racism, or at least we think we do. But in case you don't, let me give you the 3 cardinal rules of racism. The first one is the most important. This is where I lose most Negroes, because most of us were raised in colorblind religions, and we were raised in colorblind houses of worship. And although as a Pan-Africanist, I believe in freedom of religion, I must also say that if your religion does not allow you to be black, and if your religion doesn't allow you to put black people first, and if your religion doesn't allow you to struggle for black people, then your religion is an instrument of white supremacy. The first rule of racism is that all white people are racist. There are no exceptions. There are no conditions. That means your white best friend is a racist. Your white baby mama is a racist. Your white mother-in-law is a racist. Your white employer is a racist. The bishop at your church is a damn racist. The white people you work with are racist. All white people are racist. Now, Canada, I want to make sure you understand the difference between racism and bigotry, because they are not the same. I don't believe that every European is a bigot, but I know every European is a racist. So what is the difference between being a bigot and being a racist? A bigot is the white person who hates you because you're black. A bigot is the white person who wants to systemically exterminate you because you're black. A bigot is a white person who thinks you're intellectually inferior because you are black. A bigot has an emotional connection to your downfall. Not every single Caucasian has an emotional connection to your downfall. So how is racism different? Racism has nothing to do with hating Africans. Racism has nothing to do with believing Africans are inferior. Racism has nothing to do with using the N-word to describe African people. Racism, simply stated, is about one thing: the absolute control of all resources, all privileges, and all opportunities. Racism is about the monopolization of power. It has nothing to do with attitude about race. Understand why white people who you thought were good people will work against your best interests. Because what the average Negro doesn't understand, and that you need to comprehend immediately, is your personal relationship with Caucasians. I don't care if you knew them since kindergarten. I don't care if you grew up with them. I don't care if y'all pledged the same fraternity. Your personal relationship with a Caucasian has absolutely nothing at all to do with their obligation to keep white people in charge. And until you understand that, you will never understand racism. Racism has nothing to do with how you feel. It is about making sure that white people are always in control of the resources, the privileges, and the opportunities. And if you dare say that you know of good Caucasians, I would challenge you to find me any one of them in Canada right now that is working to eliminate white privilege. There has never been a white person to work for the elimination of white privilege. And the problem with black people is if we see a white person fighting against police brutality, if we see a white person fighting against economic injustice, if we see a white person fighting against the mass incarceration of black youth, we assume that they believe in equality. That is no different than a white person fighting for the rights of animals. Just because they don't think you should kill dogs, don't mean they think they're equal with dogs. Stop confusing white liberalism with a sincere belief in equality and justice. If that many white people believed in justice, your ass would already have it by now. Wake up. Canada, and Toronto in particular, is the most multicultural city in the world. And I want all you Africans to know something right now, because some of you are of the mindset that if they're not white, they're okay. And I'm here to tell you that African people have no friends. No one migrates to Canada to struggle with black people. Nobody comes to Canada to be identified with black people. Nobody comes to Canada to live with black people. They come to Canada to replace black people. And I'm bringing this up because they're using words like people of color. They're using words like disadvantaged Canadians. They're using words like minority to seduce you into identifying with the browns, and to seduce you into identifying with the reds, and to seduce you into identifying with the yellow. And I'm telling you now, Toronto, you better not make the mistake we made in the United States, because we fell victim to the people of color identifier. We fell victim to the minority people's identifier. And what I need you to understand, that if you allow your government to lump you in with the Asians, if you allow your government to lump you in with the Arabs, if you allow your government to lump you in with the Chinese, if you allow your government to lump you in with the LGBTQs, then guess what? The same people you allowed your government to identify you with, they will use them to silence your voice when the time is right.